Alright, I'm going to share my thoughts on generational trauma. So this is a good conversation that came up on Friday in one of my Zoom rooms. We talked about lots of different topics, but I'm glad this one came up. It comes up regularly, like what to do about generational trauma. And there's a few things that come under this category that I have some thoughts about. So whenever someone asks me, what about generational trauma? What about the fact that such and such is a narcissist? Those are the two that I'm going to focus on today. But when people say those two things to me, I think we have to be careful because it starts getting into blaming somebody else for the problem. So my grandmother had it in terms of generational trauma, my grandmother had it, my great-grandmother had it, now I've got it, and I'm worried about passing it on to my kids. Same as the narcissist as well, is this term gets thrown around a lot, is, well, how do I do this when actually that such and such person is a narcissist? So I think it sometimes takes the responsibility away from the fact that you can do your own work. So if I just focus on generational trauma, yes, it is a thing, and you can see some really clear patterns happening in your family where it's getting passed down, but you also have a choice to try your best to make a change and not pass this generational trauma on. And I think that I'm not really into labeling a lot of stuff. I love the emotional processing that I take my clients through because you can use it for pretty much anything and everything. I haven't really gotten stuck with implementing emotional processing on people. But when we start reaching for labels and diagnoses and names for things, it takes away from the fact that, hey, I'm feeling stuck and I actually need to process some emotions. So this is when I say to people, I think it's amazing if you can do a lot of emotional processing work before you actually have kids. And now I know that's not always possible, so I'll speak to both of these. I love getting women way before they're thinking about conception or pregnancy or having kids, having a family, or I love getting them really early on in their pregnancy. And I always have to be careful about how full on we go in with the emotional processing because it can create a stress in your body. That's why I love to get people before they actually get pregnant because you can really just kind of go for it and dive deep. And so the more clearing you can do before you are pregnant and have this child, the less likely you're going to pass on these emotional stresses into your child. And I always say to people in my groups or anyone that I'm working one-to-one with that babies don't make things better, they often make things worse. So sometimes you have to wait and find that out, but often, not always. I don't feel like I was a sleep-deprived mother, but I know there are a lot of sleep-deprived mums out there. Like, just think, if you are sleep-deprived, you can't repair, your emotional tolerance levels are a lot lower, and the life that you once had is completely different once you have this baby in your world. It really just flips your world. For me, it was a really positive experience, but I know that there are a lot of mums and families out there that don't have the best experiences and they often move through this. However, if you can do a lot of your emotional processing, emptying your emotional cup before you think about getting pregnant, I think that it sets you up for a little bit more ease. Also, if I use just a little bit of an example, and this is something that I came across because I did a lot of work on myself for my skin with natural herbs. I was on medication at one point many years ago, but there are a lot of natural herbs and supplements that you can't take when you're pregnant. So if you think, I've got gut problems, I've got skin issues, I'll deal with it after. If you're planning on breastfeeding and then maybe having a second kid, a third kid, maybe your fourth kid, it's probably going to be 10 or 12 years before you can actually take these herbs and supplements. And so, like having a kid, I don't think there is any perfect time. So once you decide to have one, you just roll with it. So I'm going off on a tangent just to explain this and why I think you should do emotional processing work earlier on in the piece, but I'll get into why you can't always do the emotional processing, or you don't realize how much you need to do until you actually have your kids. So, okay. So if you feel like you've got generational trauma and your grandmother or just other people in your family who've had it before you and it's been passed down to you and you want to break that cycle, first of all is acknowledging what's going on and taking responsibility, not externalizing it to anyone else, because sometimes our parents, our elders are not actually in a space emotionally or mentally to be able to do this work. And sometimes they're not in this lifetime anymore. They're not actually existing in this physical world. And you can still do emotional processing. In the event that you have got your kids and you realize that you're starting to pass something on to them, you're repeating patterns and behaviors, it's not too late, because I realize that, people get a little bit frustrated, especially the people who have already had kids out there going, well, has my time passed? Have I already passed things on to them? And I don't think it's ever too late to actually start working on yourself. And the key is just to get started with it. And then you can pass things on to your children, even if they're adult children. And a lot of people who might have babies, kids, toddlers, teenagers, adult children who have issues, they're often asking me, I know that I've passed this on to them. They've got a lot of issues. What can I do to help them? And I always say the work starts with you first. Empty out your emotional cup. Do the emotional processing. Learn to understand yourself and who you are and express yourself. And they will see the change. And you'll be able to hold space for them so that you can motivate them to do their own inner work. When kids are little, like usually the age of 0 to 7, their brains are very malleable as well. And this is where a lot of conditioning and beliefs and value systems start in the first 6 years. So if you've still got young kids, it's definitely not too late. It's never too late. But when you start to shift the emotions, your energy changes, and the little kids are just such sensitive beings that they will pick up on this. So as you process your own emotions, and are happy being emotional around them, knowing that it's just normal for emotions to come into the body and leave again, you will teach them to be emotionally expressive. And this doesn't mean that you're going to be able to fix all of your kids' problems because you have done your own work, but it's about teaching them that there is support and help available, and that they can reach out and ask for help when it comes to that time. And in my groups, I often say, like, I've got a 6.5-year-old Violet, that probably I am traumatizing her somehow, even though I talk about all of this emotional processing and emotional release. She still has her little issues with me, and I try and listen, and I try and work out what is it that I can do, or how is it that I can listen to her a little bit better so that she feels safe, that she feels seen, that she feels heard, and that she feels understood. But I know that despite what I do with other people, is that I may not be the right person to actually help her through all of her issues in her life. But at least if I can talk about it and know that, there is a bit of a stigma attached with going and getting therapy, not so much anymore, but at least let her know that it's okay for her to seek out therapy from someone else that she feels safe with, then I think great. And therapy is not always about, or coaching isn't always about just dealing with a problem. That's where we get stuck in Western society, that we just go and see people when we're in pain, when we have a problem. I personally have a lot of coaches in my life, and I see different therapists. And once I get out of my pain, whether it be physically or mentally or my stuckness, that's where the deeper work comes in. And that's quite an enjoyable place. Like, where can I improve? Where can I really excel? Where can I tap into my energy? So hopefully I'm making sense here. Nat Rain Wellness, interesting. I did heaps of work pre-kids, but most stuff has come out since having them. Yeah, sorry, thanks for reminding me. That's the thing, is that sometimes you don't realize the work you need to do until you have the kid and they trigger the hell out of you and they push you out of balance. So it's not too late if you have already had kids. I always encourage do as much as you can, because you usually have a lot more space and time pre-kids. It's amazing how much more efficient you can become when you have kids. I remember a friend saying to me, how do you get motivated? This is someone without a child. How do you get motivated and do all this stuff? I'm like, have a child. You like make the most of every space that you have and you just get your stuff done. You don't procrastinate. So yeah, generational trauma. If you're aware of it and you don't have kids and you want to break the cycle, do as much work pre-kids. If you are pregnant or if you're about to have a child, you can still do a little bit of work. It depends on how safe you feel bringing this stuff up. And if you have kids, no matter how old they are, if they're adult children, you've got grandkids, you can still do this work. It is never, ever too late. And we've had a wonderful 70-plus-year-old come onto the Zoom calls who she just seems like she's a wealth of knowledge. And she's continuing to do the work on herself, and she popped up in the chat saying the work never ends, which is true. It's just constantly evolving. It's a constant journey. You uncover one layer, you discover another, but it's not always painful layers. It can be all sorts of amazing stuff. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Thanks everyone for joining me live. And just a reminder that there's another 6 days before we start the Release 6-week course, which is where we dive into all these sort of topics, talk about them when the theme's coming up in the group, when it's relevant to the group, and you get to do your emotional processing as well and be supported by myself and my amazing support coaches. So the links are all over my social media, or you can go to theartoflisteningtoyourbody.com/release. You can watch the masterclass replay, which is a condensed amount of info in 2 hours. And if you feel called to, I would love to see you on the group course, and it will be the last one for 2021. So I hope to see you there. Thanks.